All right, Jabosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Steve and Teri Czinn, in honor of the birth of their sixth grandchild, Devorah Eliana Czinn, and in commemoration of the Yahrzeit of Dr. Zinn's father, Bunim Tzvi Ben Chaim, Zichron Bracha. Shmuel Robyn Korobkin, in the Silvie refuah for Rabin's cousin serving in the IDF, Benyamin Chaim Pesach ben Musha Chana, and creation of the Yahrzeit of Rabin's mother, Pesa Mira Bas Chaim. Dr. Moshe and Ellen Gavant, in memory of Dr. Gavant's parents, Yakov, Meir ben Moshe, Leib, and Shena Bas Abba, and Dr. Behzad and Yemina Soufer in merit, of the speedy and full recovery of Esther Bracha Bas Chaya. We hope that our week of learning sponsors, Leah Soul, in memory of Salma Wolf, Zichron Bracha, may her memory be an inspiration for us all. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, our precious, all those who need a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Our precious hostages should be returned b'shalom b'karov, and our holy soldiers should be successful b'chol ma'asei yedehem. And a special opportunity to wish an actual happy birthday to Yomi Frager on the occasion of his real Hebrew birthday today. Mazel tov, right? It's today. Yes, today. Today's Vav Chashon. Yeah, happy birthday. Good morning, right? Happy birthday to Yomi Frager. I'm here at Hashem with Mazel, with Bracha. I've never asked him Shanim Tovos. All right, so we'll say with that, I believe it's Vav Chashon today. Let me double check that. Yeah, it's Vav Chashon. It's Vav Chashon. Yeah, Mazel. There's so much to learn at Daf Yomi. I'm saying that, right? All right, so let's begin. Today's Daf is Kuf Lamed Hey 135. We are picking up on Kuf Lamed Dalid Amud Beis. We left off Iboilahu, which is 2, 4, 6, 8 lines up from the bottom. So remember again, we're dealing with the interesting question about whether or not a husband is believed to say he divorced his wife. Right, Reuven's married to Rachel, and then Reuven makes a statement, I divorced my wife. Is he believed? So the Gemara says, so on one hand, it makes the most sense to go ahead and say that he is, because halacha l'maisa, that's a process that he controls. So it's almost like a migo. A migo is that he could divorce her right now if he wanted to, so therefore he's believed to say he divorces. So the Gemara wanted to make this distinction between the mafreya and lahaba, that retroactively he is not believed. And I will say, by the way, where these cases come up, you'll ask them retroactively forward. So I didn't get into it yesterday, but the Rashbam highlights, give an example. Let's say witnesses show up and they say, Rachel's married to Reuven. Witnesses show up and they say, we saw Rachel having relations with Shimon. On whatever it is, on Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan. Everybody brings in the new month in different ways, right? So I say, on Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, right? So now what happens? So Reuven comes along and says, okay, but I divorced her. In other words, I already divorced her in Tishrei. So the Gemara wanted to suggest that halacha l'maisa, a husband is believed to say that he divorced his wife from this moment forward. In other words, now I'm believed that I divorced my wife. L'mafreya, retroactively, he is not believed to make that statement. So now that's where the Gemara picks up. Ibai l'Gemara s'shayla. Amar l'mafreya, mal lehemnuye lahaba. So this is interesting. So now that we've established that, right, that a husband is believed to say that he divorced his wife, essentially mikanu lahaba, from this point going forward, but he's not believed retroactively. What if he makes a retroactive statement? Can we believe him from this point going forward? In other words, let's play this out. So let's say again, leaving even aside a potential adultery case, but let's say halacha l'maisa in a situation where Reuven claims that he divorced his wife on the 25th of Tishrei. So obviously, and now today is Vav Cheshvan, as we've established, right? So today is Vav Cheshvan. So now obviously he's not going to be believed as of the 25th of Tishrei. But can we accept his statement to now ascertain or to solidify the fact that now as of Vav Cheshvan, she is divorced? So you hear this? He's making a retrospective statement. Obviously, halacha is established. We don't believe the husband retrospectively. But can we take that statement and say, okay, we're not going to apply it to the 25th of Tishrei, but we will apply it to the 6th of Cheshvan. Can we do that or not? So essentially I will say, the shaila that is being asked over here is, Mi palginan dibura or lo palginan dibura? Can you go ahead and split someone's statement in half or not? Meaning what? See, if you look at this statement, when Reuven says that he divorced Rachel on the 25th of Tishrei, there are two statements that are here. What are the two statements? Statement number one is that I divorced my wife on the 25th of Tishrei. Statement number two is that we're divorced right now. Right? Obviously, those are two different statements that they're the same. They're manifestations of the same statement, but they're two statements. So obviously, the halacha says we're disregarding the first one, that you divorced your wife on the 25th of Tishrei. But can we accept the other one, which essentially says that you're divorced from this point going forward? That's called palginan dibure. Can we splice a statement, kind of disregard the part that's halachically invalid, but accept the part that is halachically valid? That's the shaila. So the Gemara says as follows: It's machlokes. Rav Mari v'Rav Zvid Cham Amar Palginan Dibura v'Chad Amar Lo Palginan Dibura Lo Palginan. So machlokes as to whether or not we say Palginan Dibura. Can we go ahead and split the statement, disregarding the invalid half, but seizing upon and utilizing the valid half? So the Gemara says, 1 second. Of course we're Palginan Dibura. What about the following case? Listen to this. Why is this different in the case of Rava? What's the case of Rava? The Amar Rava, listen to this. Ish ploni ba'al ishti. So watch this case. So Reuven is married to Rachel. Reuven comes to Beis Din, right? And Reuven comes, we'll call it with Yitzchak, right? So Reuven and Yitzchak show up in Beis Din. And Reuven testifies that Shimon had relations with my wife. Okay, so you see what's happening over here? So Reuven, the husband, is testifying that Shimon committed adultery with Reuven's wife. Now I will say, a person is normally not permitted to give testimony about his own wife, because you're invalid for testimony with krovim, with relatives. So obviously a man is related to his wife, you can't give testimony. In this case, interestingly enough, when Reuven, the husband, shows up in Beis Din, who is he giving testimony about? Who is he giving testimony about? Shimon, the adulterer. Now obviously, implicit in that statement is what? Testimony about who? About his wife. So yet look what the Gemara says. But here, interestingly enough, when he shows up in Beis Din, he's not testifying that his wife committed adultery. What he's testifying is that Shimon committed adultery with Reuven's wife. So the Gemara says like this. Ish ploni ba al ishti. The Gemara says, Hova achar mitztarfina lahargo. So Reuven and another witness, in this case Yitzchak, could combine to go ahead and have Shimon executed. So the Gemara says, Lahargo, below Laharga. So obviously, again, Reuven's testimony works for Shimon, but will not work for Rachel. Now, what do you see over here? Palgina Dibura. Obviously, what we're doing over here is we're splicing and we're splitting Reuven's statement, right? Because when Reuven says that Shimon committed adultery with my wife Rachel, so remember again, Reuven's making two statements. What are the two statements? Number one, Shimon committed adultery. Number two, Rachel committed adultery. Now, Reuven's statement that Rachel, his wife, committed adultery is a halachically invalid statement because Reuven is related to Rachel, i.e. she is his wife. Right? She is his wife. So but what do you see from here? Palgina Dibura. We split the statement. We disregard and ignore the statement vis-a-vis Rachel. So therefore, again, interestingly enough, Reuven's statement, Reuven's testimony has no implication legabe Rachel. I shouldn't say no, but no capital implication legabe Rachel. But we will accept this statement, when it comes to Shimon. So you see from here, Palgina Dibura, that we could take one statement, split it into two parts, accept the part that is valid for us, and disregard the part that is invalid. To which the Gemara says, no, wrong case. Not wrong case, but not compatible. How so? The Gemara says as follows: Betray gufe palginon, bechad gufa lo palginon. Two different cases. So we'll say, when can you say palginon dibura? When you're talking about one statement that impacts two people. So I could go ahead and accept the statement vis-a-vis one person and disregard it vis-a-vis someone else. In the case that we're talking about over here, would be palginon dibura within one person. So the Gemara wants to suggest that you can't do that. So in other words, we'll accept the premise that you could split one verbal declaration, accept the part that is valid, disregard the part that is invalid, as long as that one statement refers to two people. Because then essentially what we're doing is we're accepting the statement regarding one person, not accepting it regarding a different person. But when it's one statement regarding one person, you can't split the words, accept half, and disregard the other. Incredible. Okay. So therefore I will say, kind of bringing this full circle, so therefore halacha l'maisa, if a man makes a statement, a retrospective statement saying that he divorced his wife, halacha l'maisa, we don't accept that statement. In other words, and I will say, what is that based on? That's based on the fact that in general, the process of a get is a public process. Right? There's eidos, there's a document, there's a call, right? The word gets out. If no one heard about this and no witnesses are being furnished, we do not believe a husband retrospectively. Now, what we do believe him is what? Currently. Why? That's the ego. Since he has the ability to go ahead and divorce her now, so why would he lie? Well, in other words, what's in it for him to lie about the contemporary state of affairs? Okay. Top of Kuf Lamed Hey, 135. Beautiful. Beautiful Gemara. Hahu Tava Kashachim. Listen to this. So there was a guy who was dying. We'll call him Ruvain. Ruvain was dying. He's a Shemira. Amrulei, Isisei Leman. All right, so this is an interesting discussion, deathbed discussion, right? So they say to Ruvain, who is your wife fit to marry when you die? Now, of course, they're not totally insensitive. They don't say when you die, right? But they just ask, when your wife, we're looking out for the best interests of your wife. Who is she going to be permitted to marry? The Gemara says, Amar Lahu Chazia Lekan Rabba. Now we'll say the Rashbam takes out the word Rabba, but he said she is fit, according to the version over here, she's fit for a Kohen Gadol. Now obviously that's not a true statement, right? The Kohen Gadol can't marry a widow, right? The Kohen Gadol can only go ahead and marry a basula, but that's why the Rashbam changes it to Chazia Lekana. She is fit for a Kohen. Now, fit for a Kohen means that she's going to be a widow. In other words, that she's all that's going to happen over here is that. And I'll take a look at the Rashbam. Chazia Lekana, but lav dafka ela shemutaris lechol adam ve'ena zekuka liyavam. Now, the truth is, Rashbam understands over here what Ruvain's saying is not that she's actually eligible to marry a Kohen. Because that can also be based on a variety of different circumstances. The statement that he's making is, she's not subject to Yibum. That's the statement. She's not subject to Yibum, that halacha l'maisa, again, she can remarry. That's the idea, that when I die, she's not subject to Yibum, that she can remarry. So the Gemara says, all right, let's analyze this a little bit. So the Gemara says, good. So my nechushla. So what should we? In other words, so the Gemara is asking, what is the chiddush in this statement? In other words, the Gemara is assuming over here that unless we know that a woman is subject to yibum, then halacha l'maisa again, she's not subject to yibum. And if the husband says that she's fit to marry anyone, i.e., she's not subject to yibum, okay. So why wouldn't we take the husband at his word? So the Gemara says, my nichushla. What should we be concerned about? After all, what did we say about say? If a man says, I divorced my wife, he's believed. Again, why is he believed? Because he has the power to do so. In other words, again, remember with all of the questions as to why HaKadosh Baruch Hu structured the get process as a very husband-driven process, which is hard for us to, one of the many things that are hard for us to understand, right? Lemaisa, at the end of the day, that's the way it works. So a husband has the control to divorce his wife. So if he says, so since he has the ability to say, he's believed to say, I divorced my wife, he's also believed to say, she's not subject to Yibum. Now I will say why? Because there's a very easy way for him to ensure that she's not subject to Yibum. How so? Divorce her. And he has the power to divorce her whenever he wants. So therefore he's believed to. Therefore, by definition, a husband is believed to say, my wife is not subject to Yibum upon my death. So therefore, again, I will say, so the Shaila is, the Gemara says this case, Ruvain's on his deathbed. We say, Ruvain, who is your wife able to marry upon your death? He says, even a Kohen Gadol, okay, not literal. He's saying essentially she's not subject to Yibum. Okay, shkayach, that's it. What's the chiddush in the case? Amli Abaye, Bahaki As Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Am Rabbi Yochanan, Baal Shama Gerashti Es Ishti Eino Ne'eman. But one second, but Abaye said, come on, we had this discussion already. Not everybody agrees with this statement that you just made. Not everybody agrees that a husband is believed to say that he divorced his wife. In fact, again, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that a husband is not believed to say that he divorced his wife. Amar Lei, To which Rava responded, Velav, Amrle Velav Milo Shaninhu, Kan Afreya Kan Lahaba. Okay, we spoke about this already. And we reconciled the two statements. How do we reconcile it? The husband is believed to say that he divorced his wife when we're talking about, again, right now, contemporarily and future-oriented. And he's not believed retrospectively. We spoke about this already. So the Gemara says, Velav Milo Shaninu, Kan Afreya Kan Lahaba, Vashanuye Nikov Alismoch. So the Gemara says, how do we know that that's a real answer? In other words, how do we know with certainty that we accepted that distinction? Amrle Rava l'Rav Nasan Bra'ami Chushla. So the Rebbe says, right. So the Gemara says, you know what? You're right. The truth is, we have to be concerned. Chushla means we have to be concerned about this situation. Take a look. The Gemara says, Chushla. It's about. It's in the middle. It's in the middle of the short lines. Chushla ka'abaye v'ti asr l'shok. The Gemara says the truth is, we have to be choshesh for the position of Abaye. Now, again, I will say, just to frame this here, right? The position of Abaye is that a husband is not believed to say that he divorced his wife. All right? Now, what's the logic behind that? Once again, the logic behind that is because divorce is a very public process that requires a document, that requires witnesses, and generally when people get divorced, there's a kol. Other people know about it. So if you have a situation where a husband is claiming he divorced his wife and no one knows about that, it just is strange. It's just strange. So therefore, again, the Gemara, so that's Abaye's logic. And therefore Abaye says, when a man says that he divorced his wife, he's not believed. So now, the Gemara says like this. So now, it comes along Rav and says, Rabbi Nasan Barami, the truth is, we have to be choshesh for the position of Abaye, which means the following. Which means, let's go full circle. Reuven's on his deathbed. They ask Reuven, who is your wife able to marry when you die? And he says, even a Kohen. So now, what we wanted to say was, he should be believed. Now, why should he be believed? Now, again, what does that mean, even a Kohen? So let's say we have a lot of interpretation. What does it mean, even a Kohen? What does it mean? She's not subject to Yibum. So essentially, what Reuven is saying is, my wife is not subject to Yibum, and therefore she could marry, she could just remarry. So why would we believe Reuven when he says, my wife's not subject to Yibum? And the answer is because he has the ability to control that status. How so? Because he has the ability to divorce her. Right? And since he is believed to say that he divorced her, therefore he has the power to say she's divorced. And if she's divorced, she can also marry anyone she wants. I mean, with exceptions obviously. But now the Gemara says, 1 second, but we don't necessarily accept that premise that a husband could say that a husband is believed to say that he divorced his wife. If we don't automatically accept that approach, then halacha l'maisa, he doesn't necessarily have the credibility to say that she's not subject to Yibum. So therefore, again, the Gemara kind of ends off and says, in this case, coming full circle, when Reuven is on his deathbed, they say, Reuven, who is your wife fit to marry? And Reuven says, essentially anyone, she's not subject to Yibum. So the Gemara says, Chushla, you got to investigate. When Reuven dies, you have to investigate, are there kids, are there not kids, are there brothers, not brothers, did he divorce her, did he not divorce her? You need to do the investigation. Now look at that, Rashbam. Chushla, ka'abaye. Because you have to be careful, like with the position of Abaye, because again, Abaye says a husband is not believed to say that he divorced his wife. V'te asr l'shok, and therefore she just can't automatically remarry. Umishum da'amar la'el l'may nechosh kamar hacha devada ika l'mechash umehacha sham inan debal shamar girashtes ishti eno ne'aman. So I will say, based on this chushla, so it sounds like what the Gemara is really saying is, a husband is not believed to say that he divorced his wife. In other words, if a divorce occurred, then what? We should know about it. There should be some type of easily available documentation. There should be some witnesses. There should be a call. People should be talking about this. The absence of any of that leads us to believe, potentially, that the husband's not telling the truth. Because of that, the whole migo disappears, and because of that, a husband is also not believed just to say that my wife is not subject to yibum. We need to do a little bit of an investigation. All chushla means is we need to investigate it. Next case. Listen to this case. Reuven is on his deathbed. Now, as far as we know, Reuven didn't have any brothers. Right, he was muchsak that he didn't have any brothers. Take a look at the Rashbam. Next Rashbam. Hahu dava muchsak lan bigave the lesle achi chazaka ba'alma below edim the yodin hayu bevadai de'ein lo banim the ilan the muchsak lan the lesle sabosay. So now again, here's the case. Reuben's on his deathbed. Now we know he has no kids. At least as far as we know, he has no kids. And to the best of our knowledge, there's a chazaka that he doesn't have any brothers. So now he's about to die. No children, no brothers. What's going to be his wife's status? What's his wife's status? Mutaris. There's no yibum, right? There's no yibum. Now what happens? Plot twist. Vara b'shas misa deles le'achi. Now, interestingly enough, at the time that he died, he said, "I don't have any brothers." Okay, so he's making a statement that confirms that which we already knew. So the Gemara says, "I'm Rav Yosef, my lechushla." So why would his statement change anything? So we'll say, so the chazaka was he had no brothers. Now at the time of his death, he says, "I have no brothers." So we're taking it for granted. Everyone knows that he has no kids. So now he's saying, our chazaka was he didn't have any brothers. Now at the time of death, he says, "I don't have any brothers." So the Gemara says, Rav Yosef says, "Okay, what's the case here? What should we be concerned about?" Chada du muchsak lan deles le'achin. Number one, even aside from his statement, we had a chazaka that he didn't have any brothers. Va'od ha'amar abai ha'amar b'shas misa deles le. Furthermore, at the time of his death, he also said he didn't have any brothers. So we had a chazaka, he had no brothers, and he's verbally confirming that he didn't have any brothers. So what's the case? So in other words, what do we have to be concerned about over here? Amar Abaye says, "Ha'amri di'ika edim medinas hayam diyadi le'isle achi." So I'll say, what's the concern over here? The concern over here is that even though, again, we had a chazaka that Reuben didn't have any brothers, and at the time of his death, Reuben says, "I have no brothers," someone comes along and says, there are witnesses overseas who know that Reuben does have brothers. Okay? So again, just to be clear, so we don't have witnesses stepping forward. What do we have over here? We have a person stepping forward claiming that he knows that there are witnesses overseas who could testify that Reuben has brothers. So now the Gemara is saying, essentially, how do we deal with that? We dismiss it. That's the Chiddush over here. So the Gemara says, "Hashta miha halasnu." Come on. That's very nice that there may be witnesses overseas. At the end of the day, they're not here. The Rashbam says, listen to this. The Rashbam says, 5 lines into the wide lines, "Mihu umishani hashta miyas lahalasnu va'ein lanu ela ma she'enenu ros." We only, again, I will say we saw this concept in the daf not so long ago. Ein l'dayin ladon ela ma she'enav ros. A judge can only adjudicate a case based on what he sees. So in this case, again, okay, somebody's saying there's witnesses overseas. I don't see it. And therefore, Allah L'maisa, again, there's nothing to talk about. The Gemara says, after all, didn't we learn this? Lav Hainu Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina, listen to this. Rabbi Chanina comes along and says, Eidim b'tzad astan v'te'aser. So Rabbi Chanina says, if there are witnesses, b'tzad astan, in the north, should we be concerned? Okay, so let's give a little bit of context to this case, because it's quite interesting. If you take a look, it's the Rashbam in the wide lines, 5 lines in. Lav Hainu, listen to this. Demakshina b'ksuv v'zaparaka isha shenes armala gabe banse demar Shmuel dishtabyon vaskinu la'aradi Yisrael va'amru nishbesi utahora ani. So we'll say, so remember again, when a woman is taken captive by Gentile captors, the assumption halachically is that she's violated. Now, there was the following case. Shmuel's daughters were taken captive. Shmuel redeemed them, brought them to Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, these girls came before Beis, and they made the following declaration and statement. We were taken captive, but we were not violated by our captors. Shabbos says, so this is a classic case. We've seen this before. Ha-pesha asar, hu ha-pesha hitir. Which means that when you bring information to light that compromises your status, you are believed to qualify that information. Why? What's the logic behind that? Because since you're the one who made it known, without you, we would have never known this. You could have also what? Remained silent, not said anything. So now that you choose to divulge, we believe you to go ahead and qualify. So therefore, again, when the daughters come along to Beis and they say we were taken captive, okay, we never knew that. So you could have come to Eretz Yisrael, no one would have ever known the difference. Now you're choosing to divulge that information. Therefore, you are believed to qualify it as well and to say that you were not that you are not violated. So the Rashbam goes on. The Rashbam says, "Visharinhu Rabbi Chanina lihinasi lekohanim." And again, the Beis Din allowed them to get married, even to kohanim. V'aminan. So the Gemara says, "V'aminan va'ika edim b'medinas hayam shenitmu." Now someone came along and said, "But one second, there are witnesses overseas who could testify that the girls were violated by their Gentile captors." Rabbi Chanina said, "Eidim mitzar astan rachtzvonis v'te'aser b'tmiyah." So the Gemara says, so Rabbi Chanina said, "Okay, come on, you're going to tell me now that there are witnesses somewhere in the north, somewhere overseas, and because potentially of the presence of witnesses overseas, we're going to prohibit these girls now. It doesn't make any sense." Rabbi Chanina essentially was saying is that halacha l'maisa, when we adjudicate a case, we adjudicate it based on the information that is currently held in front of us right now. We can't take into a case some information that may or may not actually exist in some faraway location. So therefore, Rabbi kind of plugging this back. So therefore, again, in this case over here, Reuven's on his deathbed, but Reuven has no children. There's a chazaka, Reuven has no brothers. On his deathbed, Reuven says, "I have no brothers." So the Gemara says, okay, so what's the halacha? When Reuven dies, his wife is permitted to remarry without yibum or chalitza. Without chalitza. Right? Or she's just permitted to marry. What's the chiddush? The chiddush is that upon Reuven's death, or shortly before his death, someone says, "Oh no, there are witnesses. I heard there are witnesses overseas who could testify that Reuven does have brothers." To which the Gemara essentially says, we don't deal with theoreticals like that. We dismiss that. That does not come into the Beis Din. And Beis Din dismisses it. So the Gemara says, okay, what's the chiddush? We already learned that before. That's the case of Shmuel's daughters. To which the Gemara says, Amrli Abaye, Im hakalnu b'shvuah nekel be'eshes ish. So the Gemara says, well, here's the difference. So remember again, the cases in general are not necessarily comparable. In general, in cases of shvuah, of a woman who's taken captive, whenever we can be mekel, we are mekel. There's a number of different leniencies built into the case of the women taken into captivity, for the simple reason I will say that, remember, the assumption is that she is violated. But the truth is, that's not necessarily the absolute truth. We recognize that. And therefore, again, when we can be mekel, we are mekel. By ishes ish in cases of marriage, where, again, there is a definitive status, we can't necessarily be mekel. So in other words, just because you could prove this by shvuya, doesn't mean ultimately, again, that you can prove it by Eshes Ish. The Rashbam says over here, "Mekilu b'shvuya daharbe hekilu b'chacham b'meseches ksuvas dafilu isha ve'ed echa neman." In other words, there are many kulos, there are many leniencies that are built into shvuah that are not necessarily built into Eshes Ish. Amrli Rav Nasan bar Ami choshla. So we'll say, this is actually interesting. So the Gemara wants to suggest that even though normally we've seen, when it comes to shvuya, that this concept of overseas witnesses, we reject that, and we just adjudicate based on what's in front of us right now. By Eshes Ish, maybe we have to be more machmir. Since the status of Eshes Ish, remember again, Rachel is married to Reuven, which means she has the status of a married woman. Her status is defined. By shvuya, there's a shayla. Was she violated, not violated? So again, if we could be mekel, we're mekel. But by Eshes Ish, where she has a defined status of a married woman, maybe we don't have the ability to be mekel. To which the Gemara says, you know what? Amrli Rav Nasan bar Ami choshla. So I'll say once again, what is choshla? Choshla means investigate it. Investigate it. Right? In other words, that investigate it. So if you do have testimony that says that, or if you have someone who says there are witnesses overseas who says that Reuven has a brother, you got to work it through. In that case, by Eshes Ish, you would have to work it through, and therefore she couldn't just automatically get remarried upon the death of her husband. We would have to ascertain whether or not there's any legitimacy to this claim of overseas witnesses. Okay, incredible. So we'll say the next part of the Mishnah. So up until now, we've been dealing with the idea that if a man says, "This is my son," he's believed, right? And the ramification of saying "this is my son" is a twofold ramification. One for Yerusha, and number two for Yibum. For Yibum purposes. So the Gemara says, but yet if a man says, "This is my brother," he's not believed. He's not believed. So says the Gemara, so let's analyze. Says the Gemara, V'idach, my kamri. And then I both say, now remember again, so okay, so let's go through the whole case. Right? There's Reuven, Shimon, and Leib. Reuven, Shimon, and Leib. They're three brothers. Good. So now what happens? Reuven comes along and says, we have another brother, Yehuda. Yehuda. So what's the halacha? Now, we're going to see what the other brothers are saying to this. But essentially what the Mishnah says is like this. So now, let's say again, Yakov, their father, dies. So now Reuven is claiming that Yehuda should get a portion in the Yerusha. The other brothers have no idea about Yehuda. So the halacha is that Reuven has to give some of his portion to Yehuda, because Reuven is acknowledging that Yehuda is an heir, while the other brothers are not. And therefore the other brothers are not obligated to share their inheritance. If Yehuda were to die, his inheritance portion goes back to Reuven. That's what the Mishnah said. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. The Gemara says, V'idach my kamres. And now Reuven's coming along, and Reuven's saying, surprise guys, we have another brother, Yehuda. What are the other brothers? Shimon and Leib. Like, what are they? What's their response? What's their response to Reuven's claim? Ika amri achuna hu amai. Ika amri achuna hu. So if Shimon and Leib acknowledge and say, okay, great, welcome to the family, right? They say that Yehuda is their brother. Then amai yital imo bechalko v'sulo. Then, if that's the case, then they're acknowledging Yehuda as a bona fide brother, and therefore Yehuda should inherit alongside of them when Yakov dies, and he shouldn't just share the portion of Reuven. He should get his own portion. Ela dika amri lav achinuhu. Rather, I must be talking about a case where what? Reuven saying Yehuda is our brother, and Shimon and Leib are saying he's not our brother. He's not our brother. I aim a seifa, but then look at the end of the Mishnah. Naflu lo nechasi makom acher yershu achav imo. Yeah, we learned that if halacha l'maisa, right, ultimately, let's say Yehuda acquires other property, right? Yehuda himself inherits property from somewhere else, and then Yehuda dies. So the Mishnah says all of the brothers get to share in that additional inherited property from Yehuda. But here's the issue: the Gemara says, "Ha amrile lavachunahu." But why should that happen? If Shimon and Levi are saying that Yehuda is not our brother, why should they get the opportunity to share in Yehuda's inherited assets? Okay, so I'll say, what's the case over here? The case is where Shimon and Levi are saying we don't know. So Reuven is saying, I'm telling you, Yehuda is our brother, and Shimon and Levi are saying we don't know. Again, we're not saying yes, we're not saying no. We just don't know. We're just saying we don't know. Therefore, I will say, so now this makes more sense. Therefore, Allah Chalamaysa, when Yakov dies, so Yehuda is not going to get a portion of inheritance alongside the other brothers, because the other brothers are not acknowledging that he has an inheritance right. So Reuven, who acknowledges Yehuda as a brother, will have to share his inheritance with Yehuda, the other brothers do not. On the other hand, if Yehuda acquires property and then Yehuda dies, it falls into the pot to be divided up amongst the brothers. Why? Because Reuven himself is acknowledging that Yehuda is their brother. The other brothers are saying we don't know, and therefore again the brothers are going to be entitled to share in the divided assets of Yehuda. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Zoso Meres, Marali Biadecha. So listen to this. So Rava says, based on this, we would say the following. Reuven goes over to Shimon, and Reuven says to Shimon, you owe me $1,000. Vala Omer Eni Odea. And Shimon says, I don't know. What do you see from here? Pater. Shimon's going to be Pater. She's going to be Pater. Based on what we just said. The Abai says, no. Amar Beis won't say, Amar. No, that's not true. And normally, again, such a case like that would be chayiv. I will say, why would it be chayiv? We've seen this before. Bari b'shema, bari aviv. Right? Reuven's making a definitive claim. Shimon, you owe me $1,000. Shimon's saying, excuse me. Shimon's saying, thank you. Shimon's saying, I don't know. Bari v'shema. Reuven's making a definitive claim. Shimon's making a non-definitive claim, and therefore a definitive claim wins out. So what's this case? This case over here is different. Why? What's this case? Dikamana la'acher biyadecha dami. This case is more comparable to a situation where Reuven goes over to Shimon, right? And Reuven says to Shimon, something that Levi owes me is in your hands. So he's making a claim about a third party. So a claim about a third party is not really a bari b'shema case. So therefore, in this case, halacha l'maisa, it's more comparable to that case. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam says the olam chayiv, the bari v'shema bari adav, v'shayni hacha da safek atzma inu yodea, ve'inu yachal liton tainas vadai. So I'll say in this case over here, remember the brothers, the whole top of the brothers is when Reuven comes over to Shimon and Levi and he says that Yehuda's our brothers. Yehuda's our brother. What are Shimon and Levi saying? We don't know. So in other words, the entire issue over here is a suffix. He said, therefore, again, ve'eno yachal liton tainas vadai, The Gemara says, v'safek hu. In both cases, it's a case of a double safek, and that's why the Mishnah rules as it does. Fine. Meis yachsru nechasim l'mkoman. So the Rabbi says, so now, what we've gleaned from this case is as follows. So now we can set up the case a little bit more, with a little bit more clarity. Reuven, right, is Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, three brothers. Their father is Yakov. So Reuven is coming along to Shimon and Levi. Reuven says, we have a fourth brother, Yehuda. Shimon and Levi say, their claim, we don't know. We don't know. Again, we have no knowledge about this. So now we can play out the rest of the Mishnah. So now, what happens? Yaakov dies. Reuven wants to go ahead and split the estate 4 ways. Now, he can't force the other brothers to do that because the brothers are saying, we don't know. We don't know if Yehuda is our brother or not. Now, since Reuven acknowledges Yehuda as a brother, Reuven will have to give a portion of his estate to Yehuda because Reuven is acknowledging him as a brother. Okay? Now, if Yehuda dies, so that piece of property or that is part of the estate that he got from Reuven goes back to Reuven. Now I will say what we're going to see what the Mishnah does add in is as follows. Now what we're going to deal with is the following question: what happens if? So now let's play this out. Right. So now Yakov dies. Reuven splits his inheritance with Yehuda. The other brothers are not obligated to give Yehuda anything because they don't know that he's their brother, and there's no proof to that. Reuven acknowledges it, therefore Reuven has to go ahead and Reuven has to share his inheritance. What happens now? Let's say 5 years go by, and during that time, so Yehuda's portion appreciates. It appreciates. Now Yehuda dies. Let's say again, no wife, no children. So Yehuda dies. So his portion, his estate, is now going to be inherited by his brothers. So now the shaila is who gets what. So here we go. So the Gemara says, "By Rava, shevach sheshabchu nechasem me'aleihen mahu." So we'll say, so what happens if Yehuda's estate appreciated, and now Yehuda dies? So what do the brothers get to share, and what don't they get to share? And so the Gemara says, listen to this. Mal, b'shevach hamagia l'ksefayim lo tibai lecha, d'chi naflu lo nechasi makom acher dami. So ultimately, I will say, so obviously, if the land appreciated, let's say for example, again, Yehuda had a field, he worked the field, and now there's produce in the field. So that's called additional assets. That's what's called literally improvement that gets to the shoulders. That's called produce. So if there's produce in the field, so we'll say, so let's play this out. So that produce, now when Yehuda dies, that produce gets split amongst all of the brothers, right? Now, why does it get split amongst all of the brothers? Well, Reuven is the acknowledged brother, right? And now Reuven, remember, part of Reuven's claim is Reuven is saying, Shimon and Levi, this is your brother as well. This is your brother. So because he's saying this is your brother, therefore, again, he is bequeathing to them part of this inheritance as well. So if it's additional, what we'll call additional improvements, right? Additional improvements. So when Yehuda dies, all the brothers share equally in that. So the Gemara says, Kiti bari lecha, what's the shayla? B'shevach she'ena magia l'ksefayim. What about if the improvement, Rabbi says, is not something additional in the land, but rather, again, the amplification of something that already exists? For example, the Gemara says, Kigon, dikla va'alim, ara va'aska sirtun. But let's say again, the portion that Yehuda got was a palm tree. And over the last couple of years, the palm tree got thicker. It got thicker, right? So halacha l'maisa, there's nothing quote unquote new here, but there's the appreciation of an asset. So who shares in that? Does all of that go back to Reuven? Because we view that as the portion that Reuven gave him, and therefore, again, remember I will say everyone would agree in the absence of appreciation, if Yehuda dies, whatever Reuven gave him goes back to Reuven. So now, how do we view this appreciation? Do we just view this as still Reuven's original estate, and therefore it just goes back to Reuven? Or do we view this as shared improvement? That's number one. Or, for example, Reuven gave Yehuda land, and now there's more sediment on the land. So if there's more land, how does that appreciation work? To which the Gemara says, Teku. We're not sure. So I will say, what comes out of here is as follows. Here's the takeaway. So in this case, where Reuven is claiming Yehuda is our brother, right? And the other brothers are saying we don't know. So what happens? Yakov, the father, dies. So Reuven has to go ahead and halacha l'maisa share his estate, his part of the estate with Yehuda. If Yehuda were to die, the part that Reuven gave him goes back to Reuven. What happens if there's the appreciation of the asset that Reuven gave to Yehuda? That appreciation gets shared by Reuven and all of the other brothers. Now that's assuming it's an objectively quantifiable appreciation. Let's say it's just the same asset that Reuven gave to Yehuda, but the asset just became a little bit more valuable. Is that called objective appreciation that it's split amongst the brothers or just returned to Reuven? Teku. Beautiful. Mishnah. Here we go. Misha Meisvin says Daitiki Kshral Yerecho. So let's listen to this. Reuven died, and they found a daitiki tied to his leg. Now what's a daitiki? A daitiki is a deathbed will. A deathbed will. They found a deathbed will. The Rashbam says over here, Shtar Tzavas Shchiv Mira. Now, why is it tied around his leg? In other words, the idea over here, when I say tied around his leg, is there's no chashash of forgery. In other words, obviously, if you're finding a document and it literally is tied to Reuven wrote it. Reuven wrote it. Okay, so now remember, a shchit mirah doesn't have to write anything, right? A shchit mirah could just give a verbal declaration, and that works. So in this case over here, we find that Reuven wrote a deathbed will, but we only find it after his death. What's the halacha? Hareza eno klum. It's meaningless. I will say now, why is it meaningless? Because the matnas shchiv mirah only works before death. Once he's dead, because remember again, matnas shchiv mirah is a gift. You could give gifts while you're alive. You can't give gifts when you're dead. So therefore, if you only find it after his death, ultimately it's meaningless. Zicha bala achar, bein mina yarshin, bein she'em mina yarshin, Devorah Eliana Czinn. Never said it's interesting. If the Shechimera wrote a document, right, and the document says, I gift my property to Reuven, but the Shechimera gives the document to Shimon, and he says, Shimon, the property outlined over here belongs to you, it works. It works. Even though the document itself doesn't have Shimon's name in it, it will still work halacha l'maisa to convey property to Reuven. And again, we'll see why that is. Says the Gemara. Let's analyze. Tan Rabbanon Ezu daitiki. What's a daitiki? Kol shekasav ba do tehe lemekum v'liyos. This should be for yours, for your possession. So it's a contraction. Daitiki means essentially a gift document written by a shchimera conveying property. Be'ezu matana. So what's a matana? Kol shekasav ba mehayom la'achar misa. So we'll say matana, or at least a matna shchimera, is a gift that says, or that is the way it's structured is shchimera says, here I give you this gift mehayom from today and after my death. Now we'll say what the Rashbam points out is as follows. Interestingly enough, the way a matna shchimera often works, the mechanics of it is that the shchimera conveys title now, but usage after his death. Right? So it's like a two-pronged gift. I'm giving you title right now before I die, but you're not going to really take possession and usage until after I die. Rabbi Yosef will say it makes sense, because otherwise, if he's giving a full matana, then there's no real chiddush in that. The idea over here is he's conveying title now, but ultimately usage after death. Ella mehayom ula'achar isu dahavi matana. Yet interestingly enough, again, so it's only if he structures it mehayom from today and after my death that it's a matana. So the Gemara says me'achshav lo havi matana. So again, it makes it sound like the gift. It makes it sound like title is given now, right? But it's really possession is really only done after death. So the Gemara says, so that makes it sound like that as of now it's not a complete gift. Rabbi Halakha was what it means to say. Ezuhi matnas bari shehi kamatnas shchimera. What is the example of the gift of a healthy person that resembles the gift of a shchimera? The lo kani el la'achar misa. Again, I will say, because what's the chapen of matnas shchimera? Title is given now, but usage is not till after death. Kol shekasav bo mihayom ula'achar misa. So I will say, so interestingly enough, anyone could give a gift like this. This is called the matnas shchimera, but anyone could avail themselves of a mechanism like this. In other words, if I want to say I'm conveying a gift, and the gift is conveyed as of today, but ultimately again, ula'achar misa, but it takes effect after my death. Essentially, what's happening over here is I'm conveying title now, but actual usage of it only occurs after my death. That's called the matnas shchimera, but the truth is, anyone could actually make a gift like that. Okay. Yosef Rava Barafuna Ba'achsadra Debei Rav. So Rav Barafuna was sitting in the Achsadra, in the what's the right word? Pavilion. Oh yeah, I was going to say gazebo. Right? The pavilion. Thank you. The pavilion of Rav. And he said over the following halacha of Rabbi Yochanan. Shchiv Mira shamar kasvu utnu mana leploni. If a Shchiv Mira said, I want to say now, watch what's happening over here. Normally the halacha is like this. What does a Shchiv Mira need to do in order to convey property? What does he need to do? Verbal declaration. Just say it, right? Remember again, the most important phrase by Shmuel is Divrei Shchiv Mira kiksuvin v'chimsurin damu. The words of a Shchiv Mira are as if they are committed to writing and given over. So a Shchiv Mira doesn't have to commit anything to writing. He just has to make a statement. Now watch what's happening in this case, or this is actually quite interesting. Shchiv Mira shamar kisvu utnu mana leploni. What happens if the Shchiv Mira says like this? I want you to write in a document and give over a mana to Ruvain. So that's so Shchiv Mira is saying, write it down. So what's the halacha? Umeis, and he died. Now the issue is he died before anything got written down. What's the halacha? In kosve menosnin. So what's here's the problem. So Shchiv Mira made this statement, and then he died. He died an hour later before we were able to do any of this. So what's the halacha? You can't execute on this after his death, right? Why not? Very simple, because since the Shchiv Mira said kisvu utnu, he wanted this to be done in a shtar. Maybe he only wanted this to be done in a shtar, and the problem is like this: you can't write a shtar for someone after they're dead. So interesting. So again, I just want to point out how fascinating this is. Had Shchiv Mira just said tnu mana leploni, right? Give him mana leploni. What would have happened? What would have happened? We give him a money, and that's it. It's done. The issue over here is he said kisvu utnu. I want to record it in a document and give it to Ruvain. So again, we can take care of this now. The problem is if Shchiv Mira dies before I have the ability to execute on it, you can't execute on this posthumously because you can't write a document on behalf of someone after they're dead. So the Gemara says as follows: Amalu Rabbi Elazar is daruba. Rabbi Elazar said, be careful with this ruling. In other words, that this is correct. This is correct. Daruba means just be mindful of this. The Rashbam says Shekina halacha, because this is the halacha, and therefore again in this case you would not be able to write the document after the death of Shchiv Mira. Rav Shizvi Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rav Shizvi Amar Rabbi Elazar Amra. V'amrei Rabbi Yochanan v'izdaruba. So some Rav Shizvi said Rabbi Elazar said this, and others say Rabbi Yochanan said, be careful with it. It seems to make more sense, like the way they're not arguing on the halacha, they're just arguing on who said what. So the Gemara says, so Nachman by Yitzchak says it makes a little bit more sense the way Rav Shizvi said it. Why? If Rabbi Elazar said it, then Itzrich Rabbi Yochanan l'sahudi alad Rabbi Elazar. We'll say Rabbi Yochanan was Rabbi Elazar's Rabbi. So now, if Rabbi Elazar said it, then it makes sense that Rabbi Yochanan said, listen to my student. Right? Because the Rebbe is giving his stempel on the student's statement. Ella, Amrit Rabbi Yochanan Amra. But if it was Rabbi Yochanan who said it, it's Rabbi Elazar l'sahudi alad Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi. So if it was Rabbi Yochanan who's the Rebbe, if the Rebbe said it, ultimately again, does the Talmud, does Rabbi Elazar have to give a stempel, have to give a seal of approval on his Rebbe's statement? So that wouldn't normally be, in other words, we'll say, for a Talmud to say that halacha is like my Rebbe seems to be a bit of arrogance, but for the Rebbe to say that that halacha is like my student, that makes a lot of sense. Va'od, furthermore, Tashma, Rabbi Elazar Amra, the Shalach Rabbi Mishmeid Rabbi Avo, Hevi Yodim, Sheshalach Rabbi Elazar L'Gol Mishum Rabbeinu, Shchiv Mira Sha'amar Kasvu Tnu Mana L'Ploni Umeis. The Shchiv Mira said, go ahead and write down and give a mana to Ploni, and he died before we were able to execute the document. In Kosvin V'Nostin Shemalo Gamar Lach Nos Ela B'Shtar. We can't do it, because since Shchiv Mira maybe only meant to do it with the shtar, you can't write the shtar posthumously, Ve'ein Shtar La'achar Misa. So ultimately, I say, what do you see over here? And this was said over in the name of Rabbi Elazar. So this would seem to indicate that indeed the halacha that Rabbi Elazar was the one who made this statement. On the other hand, Rabbi Yochanan said, Tibadek. Rabbi Yochanan, everybody know what we're going to do a stop over here for today. So again, what we've ascertained over here, so now this is a new case of kisvu utnu. So in a case of kisvu utnu, again, if you execute this before the death of Shchiv Mira, wonderful. But if not, you can't go ahead and write the document after the death of Shchiv Mira. That statement now we've proven is Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yochanan is going to argue. We continue tomorrow. Shkoyach. All right, have a great day, everyone.